The champagne flute slipped from my fingers, shattering on the marble floor, mirroring the destruction of everything I thought I knew. My sister, Sarah, stood at the head of the table, an ultrasound photo clutched in her trembling hands, a sickeningly sweet smile plastered across her face as she made the announcement. A low hum vibrated through the room, a mixture of shock and poorly concealed excitement from our guests, but all I could hear was the deafening silence inside my own head. My husband, Mark, didn't deny it, didn't offer an explanation, didn't even look at me. Instead, his gaze was locked on Sarah, his hand outstretched towards her as if drawn by an invisible force, confirming the nightmare unfolding before my very eyes on what was supposed to be my 30th birthday. If you have a sister, and that bond is sacred to you, subscribe now. The world swam back into focus slowly, each detail sharpened with agonizing clarity. The floral arrangements I'd spent weeks planning, the meticulously curated guest list of friends and family, the custom-made cake that was now a cruel joke, all of it, tainted. I remember the weeks leading up to the party, the subtle shifts in Mark's behavior, the late nights at the office that stretched into early mornings, the hushed phone calls he'd take outside on the patio. I'd brushed it off as stress, the pressure of his demanding job, convincing myself that everything was fine, that we were fine. Naively, I had believed in the vows we exchanged, in the future we'd painted together. Sarah, always my confidant, my rock, had been unusually supportive during this time, offering a listening ear and a comforting shoulder, all the while harboring this devastating secret. My name is Grace, and that night, I felt like my life was nothing but an elaborate stage, and I was the unsuspecting fool in a play written by the people I loved most. The irony wasn't lost on me. A celebration of my life turned into an announcement of its utter destruction. I had to excuse myself, feigning a sudden headache, retreating to the sanctuary of my bedroom, where the carefully constructed facade of happiness crumbled into silent, gut-wrenching sobs. They thought I was weak. They thought I would simply accept this humiliation and disappear. Days turned into weeks, each one a torturous reminder of their betrayal. Mark moved out, taking with him not only his belongings but also a significant chunk of my heart. Sarah, emboldened by her newfound position, began to flaunt her relationship with Mark, posting pictures on social media, attending family gatherings, rubbing salt into the raw wound of my pain. I remained outwardly composed, attending my therapy sessions, throwing myself into my work, maintaining a semblance of normalcy for the sake of my friends and family. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, haunted by the image of their faces, the echo of their laughter. I replayed every moment, every conversation, searching for clues, for signs I had missed, driving myself to the brink of madness. I heard whispers from mutual friends, the judgmental clucking of tongues, the pitying glances that followed me everywhere. They saw me as a victim, a broken woman, a cautionary tale. They didn't know that beneath the veneer of grief, a plan was taking shape, a slow, deliberate, calculated strategy for retribution. I refused to be defined by their actions, to be reduced to the scorned wife, the abandoned sister. I would rise from the ashes, stronger and more determined than ever. The anger became my fuel, the betrayal my motivation. I decided to play the long game, to bide my time, to gather my resources, and to strike when they least expected it. I was silent, but I was observing. The person I trusted most was one of them. The days crawled by, each one a fresh layer of torment. Sleep became a luxury, a distant memory replaced by endless nights of replaying the scene, dissecting every word, every gesture, searching for a reason, an explanation, anything that could make sense of the senseless. My appetite vanished. Food turned to ash in my mouth, each bite a reminder of the shared meals, the laughter, the promises that now seemed like cruel jokes. I tried talking to Mark, begging him to reconsider, to salvage what we had built, clinging to the faint hope that this was all a terrible mistake, a temporary lapse in judgment. But his eyes were cold, distant, his words hollow and rehearsed, echoing Sarah's sentiments about finding true happiness and following their hearts. He spoke of a love he had apparently always felt for my sister, a love that had been simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the opportune moment to erupt, conveniently forgetting the years we had spent together, the dreams we had shared, the life we had planned. Sarah, too, remained unapologetic, cloaked in a self-righteousness that bordered on delusional. She painted herself as the victim, the one who had been forced to suppress her true feelings, the one who had finally found the courage to break free from the shackles of societal expectations. She spoke of destiny, of fate, of a love that was meant to be, completely disregarding the devastation she had wrought, the lives she had shattered. My attempts to reason with her, to appeal to our sisterly bond, were met with dismissive shrugs and patronizing smiles. She had chosen her side, and it was clear that I was no longer a part of her world. Even my parents, usually pillars of support, seemed hesitant, caught between their loyalty to me and their desire to maintain peace within the family. They urged me to forgive, to understand, to move on, as if my pain were nothing more than a minor inconvenience, a fleeting storm that would eventually pass. But this was no storm. It was an earthquake, a cataclysmic event that had irrevocably altered the landscape of my life. The social media posts became a constant source of fresh agony. Pictures of Mark and Sarah, beaming with happiness, their hands intertwined, their faces radiating a sickeningly sweet joy, flooded my feeds, each one a calculated jab, a deliberate attempt to flaunt their newfound bliss. They vacationed in places we had always dreamed of visiting, celebrated milestones that were supposed to be ours, created a life that was a twisted mockery of the future we had envisioned. I tried to block them, to unfollow them, to erase them from my digital existence, but their presence was inescapable, a constant reminder of my loss, my pain, my humiliation. The whispers followed me everywhere. At work, my colleagues offered sympathetic glances, their words of encouragement laced with pity. At social gatherings, friends tiptoed around the subject, their conversations punctuated by awkward silences and strained smiles. I felt like an outcast, a pariah, branded with the scarlet letter of betrayal. The sleepless nights continued, fueled by rage and despair. I would lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing, my heart pounding, consumed by fantasies of confrontation, of revenge, of making them pay for the pain they had inflicted upon me. I imagined elaborate scenarios, each one more outlandish than the last, fueled by the desire to see them suffer as I had suffered, to experience the same level of devastation they had so carelessly unleashed. But I knew that violence was not the answer, that resorting to their level would only diminish me, would only confirm their perception of me as a broken, irrational woman. I needed a different approach, a more calculated strategy, a way to strike back without sacrificing my own integrity. The anger simmered beneath the surface, a constant, burning fire that fueled my determination. I began to channel my energy into something productive, something that would allow me to regain control of my life and to emerge from this ordeal stronger and more resilient than ever. I focused on my career, throwing myself into my work, taking on new challenges, pushing myself to excel. I started exercising, using the physical exertion to release the pent-up tension and to reclaim my body, which had become a battleground of anxiety and self-doubt. I reconnected with old friends, forging new relationships, surrounding myself with people who supported me, who believed in me, who reminded me of my worth. I started seeing a therapist who helped me process my emotions, understand my triggers, and develop healthy coping mechanisms. It was a long and arduous journey, fraught with setbacks and moments of despair. But I refused to give up, refused to let them win. I was determined to rise from the ashes, to rebuild my life, and to emerge from this experience a stronger, wiser, and more empowered woman. The plan was still forming, but the foundation was set. They thought they had broken me. They were wrong. The whispers turned into shouts inside my head. Every glance felt like a judgment, every silence a condemnation. I started avoiding social situations altogether, isolating myself in my apartment, the four walls closing in on me like a suffocating tomb. Work became a chore, a meaningless exercise in futility. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't focus, haunted by the image of their faces, the sound of their laughter. My boss noticed the change in my performance, the lack of enthusiasm, the constant fatigue. He offered his support, his understanding, but his words rang hollow, failing to penetrate the wall of despair that had enveloped me. One morning, I woke up with a crippling sense of dread, an overwhelming feeling of hopelessness that threatened to consume me. I couldn't get out of bed, couldn't face the day, couldn't bear the thought of another moment in this agonizing existence. The weight of their betrayal, the pain of their rejection, the humiliation of their public display of affection, it was all too much to bear. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air, struggling to stay afloat in a sea of despair. The darkness beckoned, promising solace, promising release from the torment. I considered ending it all, giving up, surrendering to the oblivion. The thought was both terrifying and tempting, a desperate escape from an unbearable reality. I sat on the edge of my bed, paralyzed by indecision, tears streaming down my face, my body trembling uncontrollably. I reached for the bottle of sleeping pills on my nightstand, my fingers closing around the cool glass, the weight of the decision pressing down on me like a physical burden. This was it, I thought. The end of the road. The final act in this tragic play. But as I stared at the pills, a flicker of defiance ignited within me, a spark of resistance against the encroaching darkness. I thought of my parents, my friends, the people who loved me, who believed in me. I thought of the injustice of their actions, the cruelty of their betrayal, the unfairness of their victory. And I realized that I couldn't let them win. I couldn't allow them to define my life, to dictate my fate, to steal my happiness. I had to fight back, not for them, but for myself. I had to reclaim my life, to rebuild my future, to prove that I was stronger than their hate. With a surge of determination, I threw the pills across the room, the bottle shattering against the wall, the contents scattering across the floor. The act felt cathartic, a symbolic rejection of the darkness, a declaration of war against my enemies. I would not be a victim. I would not be broken. I would be a survivor. That night I dreamt of fire. Not a raging inferno of destruction, but a controlled burn, a cleansing flame that purged the impurities, leaving behind only strength and resilience. I saw myself walking through the ashes, emerging from the darkness, unscathed and renewed. The dream felt like a sign, a message from my subconscious, urging me to embrace the pain, to learn from the experience, to transform my suffering into power. When I woke up, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in months. The despair hadn't vanished completely, but it had receded, replaced by a steely resolve, a quiet determination. I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready to face it head-on with unwavering courage. I started researching, delving into their lives, their habits, their weaknesses. I scrutinized their social media accounts, their financial records, their personal relationships, searching for any vulnerabilities, any cracks in their carefully constructed facade. I discovered secrets, hidden truths, buried lies, evidence of their deceit, their hypocrisy, their moral bankruptcy. The more I learned, the more my anger intensified, but it was a controlled anger, a focused anger, an anger that fueled my determination, that sharpened my focus. I started documenting everything, meticulously recording every detail, every piece of evidence, every incriminating fact. I knew that I had to be patient, that I had to play the long game, that I had to wait for the opportune moment to strike. But I was confident that my time would come, that justice would be served, that they would pay for their crimes. I began to transform, shedding the skin of the victim, embracing the persona of the strategist. I learned to control my emotions, to mask my intentions, to deceive my enemies. I became a master of disguise, a chameleon, blending into the background, observing, waiting, planning. I knew that they underestimated me, that they saw me as a weak, vulnerable woman, incapable of plotting revenge. But that was their mistake. They had awakened a sleeping giant, a force to be reckoned with, and they would soon learn the true extent of their folly. Their biggest weakness. They thought they were untouchable. I smiled. I played their game, but I was recording everything. Every saccharine sweet birthday wish from Sarah, every backhanded compliment from Mark, every pitying glance from our so-called friends, all meticulously documented, time-stamped, and stored away. I became an expert in surveillance, setting up hidden cameras disguised as innocent household objects, recording their conversations, their movements, their interactions. My apartment transformed into a war room, a clandestine hub of espionage, plastered with maps, timelines, and incriminating photographs. I learned about forensic accounting, tracing their financial transactions, uncovering hidden assets, exposing their shady dealings. I even consulted with a lawyer, a discreet and ruthless shark who specialized in high-stakes divorces and corporate espionage, learning about loopholes, legal precedents, and the art of extracting maximum damage. My therapy sessions became a strategic advantage, a way to analyze their personalities, to understand their motivations, to predict their next moves. I played the role of the broken woman, the grieving sister, the scorned wife, all the while gathering intelligence, building my case, preparing for the final strike. There were close calls, moments when I almost slipped, when my anger threatened to consume me, when my carefully constructed facade almost crumbled. Once, Sarah came over unannounced, catching me off guard, my war room exposed. I quickly diverted her attention, feigning a breakdown, sobbing uncontrollably, playing on her guilt and her vanity, convincing her that I was still a pathetic, harmless victim. She lapped it up, basking in her perceived victory, completely oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. Another time, Mark became suspicious, noticing the subtle changes in my behavior, the newfound confidence in my eyes. He started asking questions, probing for weaknesses, trying to catch me in a lie. I deflected his inquiries with practiced ease, feigning indifference, acting as if I had moved on, as if he were nothing more than a distant memory. He seemed satisfied, his ego stroked by my apparent lack of interest, unaware that he was dancing on the edge of a precipice. The anticipation was almost unbearable, the constant waiting, the slow, agonizing crawl towards the moment of truth. But I knew that patience was key, that I had to bide my time, to wait for the perfect opportunity to strike, to deliver the blow that would shatter their world. I discovered their weakness through their arrogance. They flaunted their affair, leaving a trail of digital breadcrumbs scattered across social media and email accounts, carelessly assuming that I was too broken to notice, too defeated to care. They communicated through encrypted apps, boasting about their cleverness, their ability to outsmart me, their confidence in their invincibility. But I was one step ahead, infiltrating their digital fortress, cracking their codes, intercepting their messages. I learned about their plans for the future, their dreams of building a life together, their intentions to cut me out completely, to erase me from their history. I discovered that they had been secretly embezzling money from my company, siphoning funds into offshore accounts, preparing for their escape, their new life, their happily ever after. The betrayal cut deep, a fresh wound on top of the old ones, but it also fueled my determination, strengthening my resolve, solidifying my plan. The evidence mounted, a mountain of incriminating data, meticulously organized, legally admissible, ready to be unleashed. I consulted with a private investigator, a former law enforcement officer with a knack for uncovering hidden truths, a master of surveillance and interrogation. He helped me refine my strategy, identify potential witnesses, and anticipate their defenses. We discovered that Sarah had a history of deceit, a pattern of manipulating people, of using her charm and her beauty to get what she wanted. She had lied about her qualifications, fabricated her resume, and seduced her way into her current position. Mark, too, had his secrets, a string of failed business ventures, a trail of unpaid debts, and a reputation for being a reckless gambler. I realized that they were not the perfect couple they portrayed themselves to be, that their relationship was built on lies, greed, and a shared sense of entitlement. The knowledge empowered me, giving me the confidence to proceed to execute my plan with precision and ruthlessness. I even recorded Sarah bad-mouthing my parents, saying they were old-fashioned and holding her back. I kept that one separate. That was for later. A small act of revenge that would feel so good. I smiled. The day was coming. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. I timed it perfectly, waiting for their moment of triumph, their moment of ultimate happiness, their wedding day. I knew that they would be surrounded by their friends and family, basking in the glow of their ill-gotten gains, celebrating their victory over me. It was the perfect stage for my grand reveal, the ultimate act of retribution. I hired a publicist, a seasoned professional who specialized in crisis management and reputation repair, instructing her to leak the evidence to the media, to the authorities, to their employers, to everyone they knew. On the morning of their wedding, as they were exchanging vows, as they were promising to love and cherish each other for eternity, the truth exploded, shattering their facade, exposing their lies, ruining their lives. The news spread like wildfire, dominating the headlines, flooding social media, engulfing them in a tsunami of shame and condemnation. Their families were horrified, their friends were disgusted, their employers were outraged. The police launched an investigation, seizing their assets, freezing their accounts, preparing to file charges. Their careers were ruined, their reputations were tarnished, their dreams were shattered. Sarah was fired from her job, stripped of her professional licenses, and ostracized by her colleagues. Mark was facing jail time, bankruptcy, and the scorn of his community. Their perfect world had crumbled, reduced to ashes, a testament to their greed, their deceit, and their arrogance. As for me, I watched from afar, a silent observer, a satisfied spectator as they reaped the consequences of their actions. I didn't gloat, I didn't celebrate, I simply smiled, knowing that justice had been served, that I had finally reclaimed my life. They lost everything. I just smiled and started living again. The key to their downfall wasn't just their arrogance, it was their insatiable need to brag. Sarah, drunk on stolen power and Mark's fleeting affection, started leaving a trail of digital breadcrumbs so obvious it was almost insulting. Late-night texts filled with inside jokes I was never privy to. Instagram stories geotagged at places they swore they never went. Email chains discussing our little secret. It was like they wanted me to find it. And find it I did. Buried deep within a cloud storage account they thought was secure, I discovered a folder labeled Project Getaway. Inside were detailed financial records, transfer slips to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, and scanned copies of forged documents, their escape plan, laid bare for me to dissect. They had been systematically draining company funds for months, funneling the money into a secret nest egg they planned to use to start a new life in some tropical paradise. The audacity of it all was breathtaking. They weren't just having an affair, they were robbing me blind, plotting to leave me with nothing but the wreckage of my former life. The fury that surged through me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. My hands trembled so violently I could barely hold my phone. My vision tunneled. The world narrowed to the image of their smug, self-satisfied faces. But beneath the rage, a cold, calculating calm began to settle. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. It was about protecting what was rightfully mine, about ensuring they paid for their crimes, both personal and financial. I downloaded everything, meticulously backing up every file, every document, every shred of evidence. I contacted a forensic accountant, a shadowy figure recommended by my lawyer, a man who specialized in unraveling complex financial schemes and exposing corporate fraud. He confirmed my suspicions. They had embezzled a significant sum of money, enough to land them both in serious trouble. He helped me trace the flow of funds, identify the beneficiaries, and build a rock-solid case against them. Meanwhile, I continued to play the part of the grieving widow, the unsuspecting victim. I even confided in Sarah, telling her how lost and confused I felt, how much I missed Mark, how I couldn't imagine life without him. She lapped it up, offering hollow words of comfort, patting my hand with a sickeningly sweet smile, all the while knowing she was the one who had destroyed my world. The hypocrisy was almost unbearable, but I knew I had to keep my composure, to maintain the charade, to lull them into a false sense of security. I needed them to believe they had won, that they were untouchable, that they could get away with anything. Because that was their greatest weakness, their arrogance, their belief that they were smarter than everyone else, that they could outwit the system, that they could escape the consequences of their actions. The wedding was their ultimate mistake. They insisted on a lavish affair, a grand celebration of their love, a public declaration of their triumph. They sent out invitations to everyone we knew, flaunting their happiness, rubbing their relationship in my face. It was the perfect opportunity, the perfect stage for my revenge. I decided to let them have their moment, to let them bask in the glow of their stolen happiness, to let them believe they had gotten away with it. I wanted them to feel safe, to feel secure, to feel like they were finally in the clear. Because the higher they climbed, the further they would fall. I worked tirelessly, coordinating with my lawyer, the accountant, and a team of private investigators. We gathered all the evidence, prepared the legal documents, and crafted a meticulously planned strategy to expose their crimes and ruin their lives. I even hired a professional videographer to document the wedding, capturing every moment of their blissful ignorance, every stolen kiss, every heartfelt vow. Because I wanted them to remember this day, the day their world came crashing down around them, the day they lost everything. The day before the wedding, I received a cryptic message from an unknown number. They know. My blood ran cold. Had they discovered my plan? Were they one step ahead of me? I immediately went into lockdown, securing my apartment, disabling my phone, and cutting off all communication with the outside world. I spent the night huddled in the darkness, my mind racing, my heart pounding, questioning everything. Had I been too careless? Had I underestimated them? Were they about to turn the tables on me? As dawn approached, I made a decision. I couldn't back down now. I had come too far, sacrificed too much. I had to see this through, no matter the cost. I reactivated my phone and sent a single text message to my lawyer. Execute! The wedding was a grotesque spectacle, a monument to their deceit. Sarah, resplendent in a white dress that screamed hypocrisy, beamed at Mark, who looked equally smug in his tailored suit. They exchanged vows, promises built on lies, their voices echoing with a sickening sincerity. It was during the ring exchange that everything went sideways. As the priest began his benediction, the giant screen behind the altar flickered, then died. A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. Then it flickered back to life, not with wedding photos, but with a meticulously crafted slideshow. The first image was a screenshot of a bank transfer, a large sum of money flowing from my company's account to an offshore account in Sarah's name. The murmurs turned to gasps. Then came the emails, their incriminating correspondence projected for all to see, their affair laid bare in black and white. There were photos, too, clandestine meetings, stolen kisses, evidence of their betrayal plastered across the screen. The room erupted in chaos. Sarah's face crumpled, her carefully constructed mask of innocence shattering like glass. Mark's jaw dropped, his eyes wide with disbelief, his complexion draining of all color. Their families recoiled in horror, their friends whispered in disbelief, their perfect world dissolving before their eyes. The police arrived swiftly, alerted by my lawyer, who had ensured they had front-row seats to the unfolding drama. Sarah and Mark were taken into custody, their wedding attire replaced with handcuffs. The guests, once celebrating their union, now stood in stunned silence, witnessing their public humiliation. The news vans descended like vultures, their cameras flashing, capturing every moment of their downfall. The story exploded online, dominating social media, their faces plastered across every news outlet. Their reputations were ruined, their careers were destroyed, their lives were shattered. The company immediately launched an internal investigation, uncovering the full extent of their embezzlement. Sarah was fired, her professional licenses revoked. Mark faced multiple charges, including fraud, theft, and conspiracy. The tropical paradise they had dreamed of was replaced with a cold, sterile jail cell. Their families disowned them, their friends abandoned them. They were left with nothing but the consequences of their actions. I watched it all unfold from a safe distance, a ghost in the machine, a silent observer of their self-destruction. There was no joy, no triumph, only a grim satisfaction that justice had been served. The pain they had inflicted on me would never truly disappear, but their downfall had cauterized the wound, preventing it from festering. I reclaimed my life, my company, my future. I surrounded myself with people I trusted, people who had stood by me during my darkest hours. I rebuilt what they had tried to destroy, stronger and more resilient than before. I learned to forgive, not for them, but for myself, to release the anger and resentment that had consumed me for so long. I started living again, cautiously, tentatively, but with a newfound sense of purpose and determination. The experience had changed me, hardened me, but it had also made me wiser, more compassionate, and more appreciative of the simple things in life. I understood the true meaning of loyalty, the importance of integrity, and the enduring power of hope. I finally understood that true revenge wasn't about inflicting pain, it was about reclaiming your own life. They lost everything. I just smiled and started living again. The quiet satisfaction of watching them face the consequences of their actions was more than enough. It wasn't about reveling in their suffering, but about witnessing the scales of justice balance themselves. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's a bitter medicine you take when the world refuses to offer you a cure any other way. It's a primal scream against injustice, a desperate act of self-preservation. And sometimes it's the only way to truly heal. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice. Metadata for YOUTUB only title asterisk namat anus bin shabache anus bin bor, anus bin totishad, nus, amr jibbener sobchai baro pratishad. My biggest revenge ever. Thumbnail, image, a split image. One side shows a smiling woman in shadow. The other side shows a blurry wedding scene in chaos. Text on thumbnail, bin tata anus, bin amake anus, bin sheish anus, bin kautate anus, bin chaychil anus. Tara amak shesh court chayachilo. They tried to end me. End of metadata.